We continue our season in review series with a team that is the definition of exceeding expectations, South Carolina State. Oh, yeah, it's Locked On HBCU. Play my music.
You are Locked On HBCU, your daily podcast covering HBCU sports. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of the Locked On HBCU podcast, your number one daily one-stop shop for everything HBCU athletics, Monday through Friday. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I, of course, am Darian Gray, a.k.a. the Mouth of the South, Texas Southern alum and former TSU Herald Sports editor and current contributing writer at USA Today's Saints Wire. Thank you for going on this journey with me. Make a Locked On HBCU your first listen of the day every day. And remember, just because the mic cuts off does not mean that the journey is over. Just means it's time to follow me on Twitter at South Exclusives. Starts with an S and ends with an S. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. We'll wrap up today's episode with a look at not only Caden High's ascension from Benedict College to his newest landing spot, which I was able to take a look at on yesterday afternoon. I will also look at Buddy Pough and how he is back in a familiar role, but not the role you may think. In segment 2, we'll take a look at the biggest stars for South Carolina State in this season. And in segment 1, we'll kick it off with a little bit of a recap, but I want to look at a theme. And it follows not only South Carolina State's season, but then also the way that we do this season in review. Mind you, we have 2 set segments, and then we have one additional that we kind of play with and we decide what we want to talk about when it comes to that team. The 2 set segments are, we're going to look at the stars from your season, regardless of how they performed. We'll look at those standout players from your season. We'll do that in segment 2 for South Carolina State. And the other part of it is we'll look at expectations coming into the season opposed to or compared to, I should say, expectations coming into the season compared to how the season actually planned out. So when it comes to South Carolina State, there is no better example of exceeding expectations. I will speak for myself, but I will group some people in there because I do not believe that I was in the minority. I do believe that I put a certain label on it that maybe not everybody did, but I separated the MEAC into 3 segments. I said you have contenders, you have teams who are trying to prove they can get over the hump, and then I have teams that we're not even thinking about. I can recap exactly how I went over those. South Carolina State and Morgan State, they were together in that middle tier. It's funny because you look at those two and they had completely different pans. I mean, they had completely different, their season panned out differently, I should say. But I had Howard and North Carolina Central firmly in that first section, and then I had Delaware State and Norfolk State in that last section. I would say that everything was accurate except South Carolina State and Howard should have flipped. They were near contenders, right? That's me. I put I put South Carolina State in that bubble of being near contenders. But the truth of the matter is nobody saw this coming because this isn't how it was supposed to go. Nobody saw South Carolina State going from where they were last year to where they are this year, where we firmly have to put them in a conversation of contenders on a consistent basis. The only people who truly believed in that were those who were in the room getting ready to play and coach. I don't think the mass majority of fans, I don't think the mass majority of media members connected to that team, connected to that area, I don't believe everybody knew. You know why? Because it wasn't supposed to happen this way. You bring in Chennis Berry. Let's be very clear. The reason that South Carolina State is the definition of exceeding expectations is because the way people looked at them felt extremely accurate. You looked at how they were last year, right? So this isn't a FAMU situation where you're coming off of a Celebration Bowl and have a new coach. They were a middle of the pack team with a new head coach who was coming from the Division II level. And this isn't to say that Berry wasn't supposed to succeed. I think that would be limited. He wasn't supposed to succeed immediately. He wasn't supposed to bring so many of his players and have an immediate dominating team. Who was the toughest game and how tough was it? These aren't even rhetorical. I would love to know what you think. I think the most difficult game is obvious. It was the North Carolina Central game. All right, so that was the most difficult game for South Carolina State. But was it really tough? To me, I felt like the Bulldogs were in control of that game pretty much the entire time. I know that North Carolina Central had a time in which they began to come back, but at the same time, ah, it never felt like they were going to achieve it. I was in doubt. I was skeptical the entire time because I saw South Carolina State clearly as the better team. They weren't supposed to come in and have the best quarterback, have the best wide receiver trio in the conference in black college football on both sides. That wasn't supposed to happen. They weren't supposed to come in and have a great pass rushing duo. Like the stars we're about to bring up and talk about, they weren't supposed to be stars for South Carolina State. And at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is Chennis Berry's quick ascension, right? And I know you have it's between that and then also Jackson State and their quick turnaround. No surprise that both of those teams were in the Celebration Bowl. But Chennis Berry's quick ascension with a lot of talent that came from the Division II level and him coming directly from the Division II level. And in his first year in the MEAC, absolutely dominating the conference. That's one of, if not it's one or two. It's one of the top two biggest storylines in black college football this year, in my opinion. Right? I know you could have, there's 2 to 4 that I think are in that door, but I think them in Jackson State, maybe because I prefer to look at success opposed to failures, so maybe that's why, because I gravitate towards that. But yeah, Chennis Berry wasn't supposed to come in with Eric Phoenix and have him light up the MEAC. Caden High wasn't supposed to come in and dominate, right? Like these are players that I'm going to get into when we talk about the stars. The defense wasn't supposed to be clamped down. It's not that Chennis Berry is a bad coach. No one was saying that. Matter of fact, he was the most sought after head coach in black college football. And anybody who would have got him would have been ecstatic. It's that nobody expected such a quick result. I think many people thought, okay, Chennis Berry is the guy to build South Carolina State back to being a program that is a powerhouse. But he wasn't supposed to snap his fingers and it's there. And that is the most impressive part. That is the part about exceeding expectations. Because if you were to ask most people what South Carolina State could do, you're probably looking at, yeah, maybe they can be 3. And I think it's a realistic ceiling. That's the funniest part. Everything that you would say, I would read about South Carolina State coming into the season. And then as I sit here today, I would say that was fair. They just surpassed it all. They are the definition of exceeding expectations. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that they brought a bunch of guys from Benedict College with a head coach from Benedict College, both Division II, right? We got to have that conversation. Division II talent, Division II head coach, and immediately dominated. There is a reason why everybody is trying to replicate. We can sit here and talk about celebrity coach this, celebrity coach that. But the truth of the matter is there's been more Division II head coaches that have been elevated to the FCS level this offseason. I feel like people are trying to replicate the Chennis Berry method. We need to be talking about that. That's what we need to be having conversations about. I'm doing it. But yeah, I need more people to have these conversations. I need the Tremaine Jacksons. I need the Sean Gibbs. I need the Sam Shades. I need those conversations to be had a tad bit more. And are they first of their kind? Absolutely not. But when you have success the way that Chennis Berry does, and then you have 3 head coaches hired with a similar formula, you can't help but compare it to that. You can't help but say, maybe they're trying to get that feel, The same way we look at celebrity coaches NFL players who become head coaches, and we don't say maybe they're trying to look at the long line. We say maybe they're trying to replicate that. That's the same way we need to treat it with Chennis Berry. But as we push forward, I want to look at some of these stars, man, because South Carolina State is so stacked that I could go for 3 segments looking at the stars on this program, but I'll confine myself to one, and I'll break down about 5 to 6 players as we continue with Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. And if you're lucky enough to have a playoff game in your area, I suggest you go. Even if it's not your team. I've been to one game. I've been to one non-Saints game in my life, and it was so fun. Right. So I suggest this for you. I went to a Houston Texans game when I was staying down there in college because the Saints weren't playing that day. It was a Monday night game. The freedom that you get of just enjoying the atmosphere, I can only imagine it's times 50 if you're going to a playoff game. So if you have a playoff game in your area, go to Game Time. See the seats, see the field, see the court. If you're going to wait and basketball is your game and fine, you want to go to a basketball game. It doesn't matter. It can be football, basketball, ballet, theater, hockey, baseball when it comes back up. It can be a concert, anything. It can be wrestling. I've seen everything on Game Time, but it's up to you. You have to go to Game Time. So download the app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College. When you do that, you get $20 off your first purchase. Download the app, create an account, and use the code Locked On College. Because what time is it? It's game time. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day. Every day for your second listen, make sure you're checking out Locked On SEC. This has not been a good playoffs for the SEC, but they still have Texas in it, so we'll see if they're able to come up with a victory. Go to the powerhouse of FBS college football and see what they are talking about. Now, I want to continue pushing forward with South Carolina State because South Carolina State is such a loaded team. Such a loaded team. And it's funny because when you go through and you look at these guys, the mass majority of them are, I would say it's actually about half and half. So we talked to Kobe before the South Carolina State versus Jackson State Celebration Bowl. And when we talked to Kobe, he talked about how you had Pough guys and you had Berry guys. And there was an idea that there would be a tad bit of division. You look at the stars and you have Pough guys and you have Berry guys. There is no division. It's the way that they meshed so quickly that led to some of the excellence and how quickly the excellence happened. It's really a really interesting thing. Anyway, the first guy you got to kick it off with is the commander-in-chief. It's the captain of the offensive ship. It's Eric Phoenix. Technically, is he a Benedict to South Carolina State guy? No. Technically, that is not somewhere where he would fit because he took a little pit stop in Murray State. So he left Benedict College after Berry's first championship. So after Berry's first championship, Eric Phoenix, he had been balling. He'd been going crazy. He said, all right, cool. I'm going to take my chance on the FCS level. Things didn't work for him at Murray State. Who comes up to the FCS level after Phoenix does? Chennis Berry. And Chennis Berry hit the portal, hit the call, like, hey, man, hop in that portal. We can reunite. Reunited, and it feels so good. Look, this is exactly what Eric Phoenix needed to go out on a high note. You come in here and you lead the MEAC in passing yards. You lead them in touchdowns. You're crisp, right? Like, let's take the stats away. He's crisp. Crisp, like crisp. Like, that's how crisp he was on the field. And I know you have great weapons, and we'll talk about them in a second, but you look at how quick he made decisions. You look at the physicality. One of the greatest plays this year, one of the most memorable plays of the MEAC season is Eric Phoenix against North Carolina Central. When he scrambles out to his left, he sees a North Carolina Central defender, and he doesn't go out of bounds. He doesn't try to slide. He puts his shoulder down and runs him over. And when he does, he looks down on him. That is one of the most memorable moments of the MEAC season. And to me, it is a defining moment for Eric Phoenix. It was a big-time game. It was a game you needed to have, and who set the tone, and how did he set the tone? He didn't go throw a bomb to set the tone. He put his shoulder down, and a quarterback led with physicality. That would get me going crazy the rest of the game. You could never turn me down if that happened when I was on the field, right? Like these things matter. We talk about leadership and we talk about rah-rah, but sometimes leading is leading by example. Sometimes leading is showing the path. This is how we're going to do it. This is how we're doing things. Setting the tone can never be overrated, in my opinion. But because he took that time away, or because he had that time in Benedict before he took his time away, there was no learning curve. And I think that's the real conversation. You had so many Benedict guys. You had so many Benedict college guys that there was a non-existent learning curve. And I would assume that because, let's say, you have a defensive end from Benedict and you have one who was already at South Carolina State. Okay, this one who's already here, he was with Pough. I can show you the ropes in addition to what the coaches are saying. So now we're in the position room and the coach has already given us some instruction. I've been doing this. This is not new to me. I've been just using examples, very loose examples, right? I've been backpedaling the way he wants me to. I've been backpedaling the way he wants me to. So, this is how y'all did it. You having a little bit of trouble? I can show you, right? And I know that's not how that works, but I didn't want to use something too complex. You get what I mean? This is how we do it with Coach Berry. Let me assist you. And I think that lends itself to brotherhood. I think that it allows for an easier transition because when you can rely on your teammates, you don't always have to go to coaches. You're with your teammates more. Y'all just having conversations. I think it allows. I ain't never been a college athlete, but I think that that's what it would allow. The reason that the reason that Phoenix was able to be so crisp, though, is because he had a guy like Caden High on the outside. Caden High did come straight from Benedict. And like when he was talking to Kobe, they knew each other already. All of these things do matter. They knew each other already. Caden High was the star, in my opinion, of that wide receiving crew. And he's going to be sorely missed. He hit the portal. We'll talk about that in segment 3. But Caden High was the star of this receiving core, and he won the MEAC triple count. Excuse me. He won the MEAC triple crown. Caden High had 62 catches, 908 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So he led the conference in catches, yards, and TDs, the Triple Crown winner. And to make it clear on just how impressive that this wide receiving core was, while High led in yards, catches, and touchdowns, it was one of his teammates that led in yards, catches, was second in yards, catches, and touchdowns. Y'all see that? Caden High was first in catches. Justin Smith-Brown was second. Caden High was first in yards. Justin Smith-Brown was second. Caden High was first in touchdowns. Ionaj Carter was second. This was great production by this receiving core. And I loved Caden High the most because outside of just yards and outside of just numbers, he had the ability to take a 10-yard catch for 30. He had the ability to take a 0 for 50. Right? Like he had this ability where once you got the ball in his hand, if there was any sort of space, he had it. He had the speed to go do it. So now let's get to the defensive side. I want to combine. Keyshawn Toney. I'm going to be very quick about Toney. So Toney is he one of the 3 best players? Probably not. Right? You would probably give that to Phoenix, maybe one of the linemen, maybe a couple of the wide receivers. But the reason I wanted to bring up Keyshawn Toney is because he don't get talked about. Because it's not exciting for your tight end. He was first team all MEAC, but what he did was he was reliable on 3rd and short, 2nd and short. You needed somebody who's just going to do a quick little rollout, drop off, and get a couple of yards after the catch. Keyshawn Toney did that. You needed somebody who's going to operate on that seams, operate in the middle of the field. He was going to do that, right? Like, to me, Keyshawn Toney doesn't get enough credit because he wasn't stretching the field the way those 3 wide receivers was, because he's not putting up crazy numbers because you have 3 wide receivers. It's difficult to do that. It is difficult to go and do that. To me, Keyshawn Toney is one of the forgotten players, one of the forgotten heroes of the South Carolina State offense because he operated in a part of the field that not all of those other guys really operated in. They did a lot of stretching the field. They did a lot of in between the numbers and the seams. But then you looked at Toney, who did a lot at the seams and in between. That's why I liked him. Ashaad Hall and Jayden Broughton, I got to put them together. They were the best pass rushing duo in Black college football. You had Hall, who had 11 sacks, Broughton, who had 8.5 sacks. You had 14 tackles for a loss apiece between those 2 guys. You had 5 forced fumbles between those guys. You're looking at 2 players who knew how to meet at the back, who knew how to meet at the quarterback. They knew how to get after the running back, and they knew how to make game-changing plays. I love talking about certain stats that just matter no matter what. Tackles for a loss, I don't need to quantify those. I don't need to say, it was a 5-yard loss versus a 1-yard loss, because I actually really don't care. unless it's in the course of the game and say, oh, you forced a 2nd and 15 versus a 2nd and 11. Yeah, in the moment I care, but overall, tackles for a loss show me that you were forcing negative plays. You know, if we really want to get deep into it, you can talk about who forced it and pushed it back. But like number wise, there's not too much context to give. Same with forced fumbles. I don't care where the forced fumble happened. You forced a fumble. That is a potential game-changing play anywhere on the field. Does the degree of benefit increase when you're on your own 5-yard line versus their 5-yard line? Of course, but if you can put yourself in scoring position, that's different than stopping somebody, but both puts or takes points off the board. Lastly, you have Aaron Smith, the quarterback of the defense, a linebacker who is extremely rangy. He's going to be somebody who I'm interested in watching. He's going to be at the East-West Shrine Bowl, so that's going to be something that's going to be fascinating. He's a player who goes sideline to sideline, and I want to see him in person because I have a couple of things that I want to watch for Aaron Smith, and I'll be doing that closely at the Shrine Bowl. And he had 95 tackles, which was second in the MEAC. He had the most tackles per game. He had the most solo tackles. This is a player who I think is going to be very attractive to scouts. I think he's going to be somebody that they really do gravitate towards. And I want to see exactly how his pre-draft process transpires. That'll be something that's interesting to me. But as we push forward, I want to look at Caden High. I want to look at Caden High because he's ascended. He's going D2, FCS, FBS in a matter of 2 to 3 years, depending on how you look at it. And I want to talk about it as we continue and wrap up today's episode of Locked On HBCU. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, you can put down a $5 bet and you will get $250 back in bonus bets. Doesn't matter if you win or lose. The playoffs are so unpredictable. This is the best time to take advantage. It's free money, literally. You put down a $5 bet, right? Let's say is there anything that's already set? I think there is nothing that's set. Oh, the Eagles versus the Packers, I believe it is. No, the Eagles versus the Commanders. The Eagles versus Commanders. Put some money down on it. If you're wrong, don't even matter. Oh, no, it's Eagles versus Packers. I was right about that. Eagles versus Packers. Don't matter. You put down some money, you get it back, $250. You want to go to the NBA? That's cool too. You want to go to hockey? That's cool too. All you have to do is go to FanDuel.com, and it doesn't matter if it's any of those 3 sports that I just named. Go to FanDuel.com, put down a $5 bet. If you win, $250 back in bonus bets. If you lose, $250 back in bonus bets. So really, there's no such thing as an L. Go to FanDuel.com to make every moment more. As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On HBCU, I appreciate you for making this your first listen of the day every day, making it all the way to segment 3, and I thank you 2 times for that. Thank you. Caden High has gone from Benedict College as a freshman to South Carolina State as a sophomore to now Stanford as a junior. In a 2 to 3, depending on how you look at it, because his sophomore year just ended. Caden High has ascended from D2 to FBS, and ironically, he didn't skip anything. Like Reginald Vick, he just went from Virginia Union to, I think, Wake Forest. I think he went to Wake Forest. So you go CIAA to ACC, boom. You just jump over the FCS level. But it's interesting to me that you spent a year on each. And I don't know if you hop back in the portal if you're Caden High, depending on how this goes, right? I don't know. I got a friend who, I have a family friend who, they were all in the portal. And I was like, dang, the portal again? The portal again? And I've seen them offers. And I said, the portal again. I get it. I don't know, though, once you get to Stanford, if you're saying, I want to go get to USC, right? I don't know if you're saying, I want to go get to the Big Ten now. Because I don't know what conference Stanford is in. Let's see. Stanford Football Conference. I want to say they're like, oh, they're in the ACC. Yeah, I don't know if you leave. Like, you're in a Power 4 at this point. You probably don't leave for a different Power 4. But Caden High strikes me as a player similar to Bashul Tootin, who I genuinely believe will have success on this upper level. I genuinely believe he's not coming in to be a depth piece. And what's beautiful about this is that he's a wide receiver who you can have a role. If he's able to continue to stretch the field, he immediately has a role at Stanford. It's not Caden High could have been this. He doesn't have to be the 1,000-yard receiver. We'll see what he's able to be. I will really be watching. I will be watching Stanford or tracking Stanford just for this. The same way I tracked Virginia Tech for Bashul Tootin. But I think as a wide receiver, it's much easier to boost your draft stock because if you have a specialty, it may not get you into the first round, but what it could get you into is a day 2 pick, an early day 3 pick, because people know, oh, you're a field stretcher. We need that. That's the difference. You could put 4 wide receivers on the field at once. If you have a niche, they will find some. There will be somebody who needs you. I promise you that. If you have a niche and you do it well, let's say that he is a kick return specialist. That'll get him through the door. Let's say that he's a guy who has shown the ability to take the ball and run with it. He's a run after catch guy. That'll work for him. Let's say he's a stretch the field and we're going to get a lot of yardage without the ball in our hand. That will work for him. He showcased the ability to run after the catch. He's shown the ability to work with the ball not in his hands. He's shown so much potential at South Carolina State, at Benedict College, that I think he'll be able to do this on the next level. I genuinely do. We'll see. We'll see. He ascended up a subdivision once, and he'll do it again. Now for Buddy Pough, he's back as the interim athletic director, and I just thought that was interesting. I don't think it's going to be a permanent thing. They're going to find a new one quickly. I don't know if he'll have to make any huge decisions, but Buddy Pough as your athletic director is something I thought was a cool note, and it's something that I wanted to highlight because, in my opinion, it fits him. He's been connected to South Carolina State for so long. He is South Carolina State in so many ways. Him being the athletic director, and he has a great track record. He was able to pick up Chennis Berry. I know it wasn't the most difficult one. It was the most obvious decision he could have made, but hey, I do believe in getting cookies for things that you are supposed to do. Not gonna lie, I do believe in getting cookies for things you're supposed to do. So shout out to Buddy Pough picking up Chennis Berry. I'll be interested to see Caden High's ascension. I'll be excited to see if Buddy Pough has to make any decisions because this athletic director search could end in the next month, and he probably won't have to do anything. But if it extends out until next season, there may be some decisions on basketball coaches that like just winter sports could need decisions to be made. So anyway, tomorrow we're going to be looking at Deshaun Jackson because Deshaun Jackson and his West Coast pipeline that he's creating. I read an interesting article on this recruiting strategy on HBCU game day. I want to bring it to my show because I think that this is interesting. I think this is important to point out because he's bringing something new to HBCUs that I really didn't think about, but it should have been obvious that he would bring. It has nothing to do with name recognition. Now, we'll look at that on tomorrow's episode. In the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we're here to the family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.